Hey, today we're going to talk about William Wordsworth. We're in a race against the clock right now because I have food in the oven and I don't want the timer to go off. So those are the conditions we were working under. Okay, William Wordsworth. So there are a lot of different portraits of Wordsworth if you want to Google image him for fun. And he looks different in all of them, which is weird to me. But I chose this one because I think this image, if you're watching the video, captures, I don't know, something of his essence, maybe. Can I say that? Like, the way that I think of him, he looks in this picture. And he looks a little discontent. He was not a person, like Blake, we said, lived to the outside person. He lived a fairly normal life. He was married, he had a job. Wordsworth was not like that. He was very much always in search of something. He was like a wanderer. When he was a kid, he was described as being moody, unruly. So he just was never really settled or content. And that carried through to college. He went to Cambridge? I don't know where he went. I apparently just totally made up that he went to Cambridge. He could have. But his third year of college, it doesn't matter where I went to college, his third year of college, he decides to kind of break free from the confines. He goes into nature. You know that the Romantics were big on nature, so he decides to go hiking in the French Alps. This is not him, if you are looking at the video. This is, I believe, a woman, and recent, and not William Wordsworth for many reasons. But while he's hiking in the Alps, he finds something that he is maybe looking for. So he kind of feels like he's where he should be. He kind of maybe feels at home. And he finds what he finds. He's there actually on the first anniversary of the storming of the Bastille, which is right here, if you're looking at this. I promise you, just pay attention because I'm not going to turn this into a history lesson. I'm just going to tell you like 4 things that are relevant to Wordsworth. So pre-French Revolution in France, the only people who had like personal freedom and free will were the nobles and members of the clergy. Everyone else was seen as kind of just having to do a duty. So the regular, everyday, normal people weren't really seen as having a sort of personal freedom. They weren't their own people. I don't think that sentence was correct, but you know what I'm trying to say. So 2 philosophers, Diderot and Rousseau, if you want to look them up for any reason, they kind of started to put out into the public ideas about autonomy and free will, and these caught on. And Wordsworth was there kind of in the midst of this revolution, and it was one of the greatest events in human history. It was to guarantee the freedom of everyone. So he was there, and he was inspired. So inspired that he actually married a French woman, and he felt at home, he felt settled. But what happened was there was this group called the Jacobins, and I said it like Jacobins because I don't know if I've heard like the Jacobin and Jacobin. I think it's Jacobin though. So they were revolutionaries, and what happened though was they sort of became violent vigilantes on the other side. So they were persecuting anyone who they believed had allegiance to the king. So it was kind of like the promise of the revolution kind of got carried to a certain point where the revolutionaries were then enacting violence on others for being not revolutionary. So it was under their authority now. And they were brutal and bloody as well. So this, when I was reading this, it kind of reminded me of The Fly, what we were talking about in The Fly by William Blake. So the little girl, she kind of grows up when she learns of death. So this was a real, I think, coming-of-age moment for Wordsworth. Certainly, he wasn't innocent up to this point, and he knew about death, and like I said, he was never really content. But this was like a really big heartbreak for him when he saw the end of this revolution at the hands of revolutionaries. I think that it sort of took a toll on his idealism, on his spirit. So what he did was he took back to wandering, because that's ultimately what he was. It was sort of sad. There was tension between England and France, and it wasn't safe for him, so he had to move back to England. And I told you that he married a French woman. I think I told you that. And they actually had a kid, but he couldn't see her anymore. It's like estranged from her, and that was apparently very difficult for him. But so he's having like this, this personal crisis. He's separated from his wife and his daughter, Caroline, I think was her name. And he is having an emotional, a mental crisis, because the thing that he thought he was looking for, this sort of revolutionary spirit, had turned itself around and was now bloody and violent. And he was feeling, I think a lot of his idealism was kind of shot. So he decided to go back to what he was comfortable with, and that wasn't, like I said, to go, I don't know, get a job and live a nice life. He was very much a wanderer. So he took to searching in the more rural parts of England. And what he found was a renewed spirit in just meeting and talking to the people that he saw. So it wasn't like a great act like the French Revolution that kind of helped him put himself together, but it was just seeing the spirit and faith of just the everyday people that he encountered when he was walking around rural England. One person that he met was Samuel Taylor Coleridge, or Samuel Taylor Coleranch, if you'd like. And there's something he lectured on top of I wish I wouldn't have said this. Something to do with corn, I feel was a thing. It's not a corn store, because I don't think that's a thing, but it was something to do with corn. I don't know. I don't know what you do to corn, but anyhow, so he wasn't a big time guy in a huge university. At least that's not the impression that I get. But he would give lectures about the revolution, and he was known for kind of keeping the passion of the revolution without any ideas that would lead to or spur a violent acts like Wordsworth saw in France. So he really appealed to Wordsworth because he still very much had those revolutionary ideals, but he was also really dismayed by the acts of violence he saw the Jacobins carry out when he was in France. So they team up, they become friends. Their friendship, they were kind of frenemies, actually. They had a rocky friendship. They loved each other hard, though. You should know that, for a while. And then things went downhill. I don't actually know if they stick around for part 2 when we talk about Coleridge, and I'll tell you if they mend their friendship, because I don't know. Alright, so together they decided that they could spark a new revolution. And they wouldn't do this by giving overly political speeches. They wouldn't try to stir up people's emotions towards anger, let's say. So they didn't want this to be overtly political. They decided that they could use art. And the way that they used art was to really capture the people that Wordsworth had seen when he was walking around. So we go back to these ideals of the revolution, the things that Diderot and Rousseau were talking about. And that was the idea that everyone deserves dignity, that every person is an autonomous person deserving of respect, who has their own personal freedom. And so they thought, we're not going to give speeches where we directly say these things because we don't want to get people inflamed. We want to try to present these ideas in a way that will be palatable. So they work together on these poems that we're going to read, and they're called the lyrical ballads. You will see the name ballad in the title. They're called the lyrical ballads. And so what they did was they wanted to not write in like, and I think you might like this if you didn't like William Blake, they didn't try to write in like an overly poetic, educated, I don't know if educated maybe is offensive, but in like an overly stylish and poetic way. They wanted to use the words of normal everyday speech to reach normal everyday people and to tell these people that they were deserving of, you know, like we said, personal freedom, respect, dignity. And one way that they did that was they didn't just write in a language that everyone could understand. They featured people in their poems who were considered outcasts, who were poor, who were women, who were just everyday people. And through telling their stories in a language that everyone could understand, they kind of told people subtly their ideas about revolution, like what we said, everyone's deserving of dignity. So they didn't present these ideas in an overly political way. Rather, they just took to art to more subtly, let's say, to more subtly discuss these issues and to put forth the idea that every person, if they're an outcast, if they're a woman, if they're poor, every person is deserving of, every person has freedom, and they're deserving of, you know, being treated with respect, and they have dignity. So they were, I guess, successful. It sold fairly well. That's all I'm going to say about it right now. We don't need to know anything else about it right now. But so when you read these, I want you to know that these ballads was an attempt to like kind of replicate the language that we saw in ballads. But the ballads kind of had like pretty conservative messages. If you remember, like, don't cheat on your spouse. Not that that's an overly conservative message, but you know, like there were rules. The people used the ballads to kind of follow rules. Here, they're not encouraging people to necessarily, well, they're kind of encouraging people to break the rules. They're not using the ballads to create a really conservative message, though. They're using them to put forth revolutionary ideas in a way that everybody, no matter where they're from, can relate to and appreciate. All right, that's all. It's pretty good. I will see you in class on I don't know what day.